Hi, man. How are you?
Good.
Good.
How you doing?
I'm doing well. I actually have something on the tip of my tongue that I wanted to start this off with because I find it so funny. This is not something you've ever said to me, Andrew. Andrew told it to me, and he said it to you that when you come to class at 4:45 a.m., it is the worst part of your day, and you hate being there. And I was like, I can believe you said
Yeah,
that.
I despise it.
So, but you come and you're
I come
regular. So it's so
four times a week.
take me through that entire like ball of wax of hating it but still doing it. But and I'm
Yep.
sure you derive some joy from it in some pieces, but the overall sentiment is
I mean, the idea of waking up at 4:20 a.m. any day is not a pleasant idea.
sure.
And you know how there's these people, they kind of like they go to the gym, they feel the rush, the music starts playing and they're really into it and things like that. Yeah, none of that's really for none of that does it
Yeah.
for me. Um, it is it's just hard. Like you go and your body's still half asleep and and it's still hurting from the previous day and you have to do, you go through the stretches and every stretch you're like, oh man, I feel that part, I feel
Sure.
that part and everything else. And then you look on the board and there's like so much stuff written and some of it seems impossible and you think, this is what's facing me in fact, when I sign into class,
Mm-hmm.
I don't ever look at it.
Yeah.
I actually have to look away from my phone and I
Sure.
press sign in and then close the app.
Yep.
So I have no clue what the workout is until I actually show up in the morning and
Yep.
look at the whiteboard.
Yep.
And but it is pretty undeniable truth that you need to exercise and
Mm-hmm.
push your body. And so I power through it.
Yeah.
It becomes a routine. I think the routineness of it is very helpful
Sure.
for me.
Right.
That's how I've powered through difficult things in life, like whether it was school, a certain subject, or whatever the case may be.
Right.
You kind of just create a routine and you just say, you know what? I'm just going to have to power through this.
Right. So it sounds like on a day-to-day basis you are not relying on motivation. You're not relying on getting amped up. You're not relying on hype. You're not relying on feeling good.
I would like to, I try to,
Sure.
and I'd like to think of the end result of
Right.
you'll feel good, and it's true. I mean, you sleep better, you
Right.
perform better at work,
Sure.
there's so many benefits to it. So I think, and probably because of my work too, I'm very long-term minded. So
Sure.
I have a very, where most people have a challenge to associate themselves with the 50-year-old
Sure.
version of themselves or whatever age, 20 years ahead or 10 years ahead. I find that much easier to do.
Yep.
Right. So I guess so there is probably some motivation there, but yeah, it's not a natural, like, oh man, I can't wait to get to the gym.
Right.
Feeling. No.
Right. And there are legit people like that, and they live at the gym and all that kind of stuff.
Mhm.
You might characterize myself and Andrew as those types of people, but yeah, that's and it's just interesting because it's obviously been very cognitively approached as opposed to, well, I mean, what would you rather be doing with your time?
Oh,
Like, okay,
sleeping during that time,
yep,
or watching the news,
Sure.
reading something. Boy.
so okay, you get the commutes and you get the actual workout hour and you get the commutes and you get whatever other associated workout activities like, oh, I gotta go to the store and get bananas or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
You take all that time. You don't have to work out anymore. It's just default. You get to press a button. You don't have to work out anymore. What would you use that time for instead?
I'd probably watch the news or read something or
Sure.
potentially just go to sleep later. Right
Sure.
now, I've had to adjust my sleep.
Just sleep more.
Yeah, just sleep more. Well,
Yeah.
I don't know if I would sleep more because I feel
Sure.
I try and get my sleep in, right? I mean, the advantage of disliking working out
Mm-hmm.
is you want everything else to be dialed in. Like I
Sure.
want to make sure I get my 7 hours of sleep at least.
Yep.
I want to make sure my diet is on point. I laugh with the group in the morning group sometimes because we'll go out for drinks or something like that.
Sure.
And like you can hand me a $20 like margarita, the highest end stuff, and I
Yeah.
look at this thing and go, this is going to cost me a WOD choice A
Sure.
that I basically did for nothing. Like I'm
Yeah.
pissing away one of the WODs
Yeah.
and I have to go back and redo it
Yep.
if I drink this thing. Right? And it's
Yeah.
not that I don't want it, it's delicious
Yep.
and I want it, but I so despise having to do 20 minutes of a WOD for it,
Sure.
that I'm almost willing to sacrifice that part of it. So I wouldn't necessarily sleep more,
Right.
but I would probably, read something, watch the news. I don't watch any TV.
Yeah.
In fact, we have to cancel the cable. I think I donate more money to the cable company than
Yeah.
I get any value out of.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. I understand that. You touched on something interesting that it's this idea that I think is not talked about enough, and that finance and fitness are like basically cousins, right?
Oh yeah.
And so everything that you just described, I was like, man, you could sub out the verbs and the nouns for some sort of financial planning thing, and it's like, if I buy this great brand new TV, man, I have to work on Saturday because that's $800 and I make this money. I mean, you're literally quantifying it in those exact same
It's
ways.
exactly, in my mind, they are, just like you said, they're like brother and sister in terms of, it's just different parts of our lives.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, and it makes sense then that people struggle with both of those tremendously.
Yes. Because you have to be able to make a connection with the version of you that is 10 or 20 years into the future.
Yep.
And that is insanely difficult for us to do, right? We can't imagine ourselves going through, we have a very hard time, and you see this in the world in general, we have a very hard time associating, stepping into other people's shoes.
Sure.
And so the same thing in ourselves, we have a hard time stepping into the shoes of the person that we're going to be 20 years from now. Right? Just like 20 years ago, if you think back to the person you were, if you had that person describe you at this age, they probably would have been way off.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It would have been completely off.
Yep. And you just wake up one day and there you are.
There you are. It's like, whoa, what happened?
It happens whether you like it or not. So 20, I don't even know how old you. How old are you?
37.
Okay. Oh, I didn't realize. I'm 35. I didn't realize
we're pretty close.
Yeah. 20 years ago. Math is leaving me. What were you doing 20 years ago?
17. I was in high school. In Antioch, probably trying not to get shot. I went to Deer Valley High School, so it wasn't exactly the cream of the crop, high-end thing.
Yeah. Did you play sports in high school?
Tennis.
And then after you finished high school, you went to college, I presume. Did you continue the pursuit of physical things through college?
I did. I always tried to do some things. I mean, I'm not particularly great at like exercise and things like that.
Sure.
So I kind of always need the one-on-one sessions and all. But I did. I always wanted to be healthy and I read a lot. I try and read with a very objective, critical mind.
Sure.
So try and always question like, does this really make sense? Or, if it doesn't make sense, I tend not to believe it, or I need further evidence for it. So early on, I understood that exercise and working out and physical activity in general were a very important component.
Yep. And so it sounds like you came to that conclusion like pretty early on. So somewhere in college, you're like, all right, well, got to go to the gym and just get it done.
And I went to UCLA, which had a really cool gym program where you can do like jiu-jitsu. They had jiu-jitsu classes on campus that you can just go to. And they had like 20 different things you can do there. So it was actually a really nice setup in campus, and I lived on campus, so it was really easy just to kind of walk down from your dorm down to the gym and do this stuff. So
that's great.
Credit to the school to kind of design a pretty user-friendly setup for physical activity. Yeah.
Have you ever used like non-gym surrogates for keeping fitness in shape? So like, I don't go to the gym, I rock climb or swim or whatever. Or has it always been like, you know what, man, I just gotta go to the gym?
It's usually just been going to the gym. I mean, rock climbing, things like rock climbing, I'm scared of heights, so and with my luck, I'd be dead pretty fast, so I'll pass on that. Swimming I could do, but I don't know, I need like the group motivation of, the dependability, and I can't really just go to the gym. I mean, I've had a 24-hour fitness membership probably since I was 16, 17 years old.
You still have it now?
I don't think so. I'm sure it's expired by now. I used to buy those Costco like 2-year, setups. So now I'm sure it's because I've been here for like I think going on 3 or 4 years. So I'm sure it's expired now. But yeah, I used to have them, and I would go and I would do stuff, but I don't know that there was like a cohesive process to it rather than just like show up and do stuff.
Right.
I mean, I would read Men's Health or whatever, some of those magazines were to get ideas, basically.
Try and like mimic and put together based on what you saw.
Right.
Was going on
like what
there.
they were telling me, like, oh, do upper body on these days and then do
Yeah.
lower body on these days. I'm like, okay, I guess I'll do that.
Gotcha. And so that kind of takes you maybe, I don't know, through your 20s or something like that. So what were you doing for activity stuff? You've been with us 3 years?
I think three, going
Somewhere
on
in the
4,
neighborhood.
something like that, yeah.
So prior to that, what stuff were you up to?
So other than like 24-hour fitness stuff, I worked in London for a while, and actually at the job I had, they had a gym downstairs. So the workplace I had in London had a doctor, dentist, gym downstairs for the employees. So like if you were hurting, you can just go downstairs, get checked out, and then come back and get
That's
to work.
pretty cool.
Yeah, so it was kind of cool. And the gym had discounted personal trainers. So
Yeah.
I did the gym and with the personal training when I was in London. Back here in the States, I actually was for, I want to say it was probably a total of 2 years. I joined a place called God's Gym in Oakland.
Okay.
So it's like a personal training concept. They're half-hour workouts. It's all weight, so it's machines, and there's not really a lot of free weights. It's almost all machines.
Sure.
That's done. So I did that in Oakland for a couple of years. That was actually immediately before joining you guys. That was kind of the go-to.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then you joined us, and then, you know, I think I recall you saying something like, oh, wow, yeah, CrossFit gym. Oh, they have a CrossFit Games. Oh, that's kind of cute. You know, not really recognizing the
there's a
huge
bigger
cultural,
thing. Yeah.
subterranean thing.
That, I did not know what... I literally thought that was like a cute name you guys came up with. Like, we'll call ourselves Cross Fitness, that we fit across, I don't know, abilities or what, I don't know what it was even. But I thought, oh, that's cute. The Yelp reviews are really good.
Yeah.
So let's go try it out.
Yeah.
Did not have the slightest clue that CrossFit was a thing or had never even heard of it in my life. I literally thought that was the name you guys came up with for your business.
Yeah, and I was talking with the same thing with the Visa, and I think probably 3/4 of the people that step into our gym have been like, oh, CrossFit, maybe I've heard of that, or maybe they think it's an independent thing or whatever. Really have no idea what's in store for them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, what did that first, I don't know, 6 weeks to 6 months feel like? Were you kind of like, is this for me? Like, or were you like, oh, okay, cool, I get this, I understand what we're doing, and like, cool, so let's do it, I'm good.
Yeah, no, I was, like, what do they call that? A blind leading the blind or deer in the headlights type of approach where, but my approach also is if I'm going to go and pay somebody for something, that means I've kind of gotten to the point where I'm willing to take on, I'm believing in them and doing their expertise, right?
Sure.
And also another kind of similarity with finance where people will like pay finance people, but then not really follow what they do.
Sure.
So I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
so or they'll go to the doctor and pay the doctor to go see them, and then they actually won't follow the doctor's instructions. It's like, well, why did you go to the doctor to begin with then? So I went in saying, look, this is what I'm paying you for.
Right.
You tell me what to do and I'll do it. Right. So, I mean, it was weird. There was a lot of terminology to have to learn that just didn't really make any sense. And it was wonky. And I mean, to this day, 3 or 4 years or however long it's been, to this day, I'm still learning moves.
Right.
So yeah, I would say I started pretty green.
Yeah. No. Well, part of that is we keep introducing new moves.
Yes.
So
Well, but even the basics, like a clean is, that was the first time I heard of a clean was, I mean, I didn't know about Olympic weightlifting. I didn't sit at home and watch Olympic weightlifting on TV. No.
You weren't watching the
I didn't know that was really a sport.
Yeah, most people don't.
Yeah.
When you say, oh, so you have a background in weightlifting, and they go, yeah, I do some like bench press and curls and stuff. I'm like, oh, okay, fine. I know exactly what you're talking about. Like, we don't need to, cut that up and talk about. Yeah, okay. What kind of goals do you have on the horizon right now? So you hate going to the gym.
Yeah.
It's the worst part of your day.
Yeah.
So you're deriving some sort of long-term value out of it, right? So health and all this kind of stuff. But I mean, what does that specifically look like to you? What does the 20-year, 57-year-old version of you look like and do?
And like Dave, that just comes into the gym and nails a wad better than me, he's way older than I am.
Yeah.
I mean, really, I just want to be, I feel like thanks to advances in medicine and in general, we live in a wealthier part of the world. Mm-hmm. So I can see that for our generation, I mean, if you look at life expectancy tables, again, this is kind of what I do for a living, so I'm a little
Sure.
bit of a data geek.
Sure.
And if you look at life expectancy tables, really the only reason they're fairly low in the U.S. is because of the opioids and recent issues that have
Sure,
popped
yeah.
up. But if you remove a lot of that data and just look at people who take care of themselves and are pretty healthy, hitting your 90s is is becoming very common,
Right.
right? I wouldn't say it's a sure thing. Certainly, we're still battling cancers of all sorts and things like that, but it's pretty common. So my thinking is I don't really know what the next 20 years holds for me,
Sure.
right? Just like my 17-year-old self couldn't envision my 37-year-old self. My 37-year-old self has a hard time seeing where 57-year-old Eric's going to be.
Yep.
But I think this will take me to the path of being able to enjoy life during those years,
Right.
being able to travel and do a lot of activities and things like that. Trying to hit a long life expectancy. I have no desire to demise any earlier than I need to.
Sure.
If I do have to go through a battle of cancer or things like that, it's scary. But the reality is, I'm a data geek, so the statistics for surviving cancer are actually quite high. There's something in the tune of 75-80%,
Sure.
right? You'll as a survival rate long term. So, but you're going to go through a period of chemotherapy, which tears up your body and all these
Sure.
other things. So, if your body is kind of fine tuned and ready for these battles,
Right.
your chances are just that much better, right?
Right.
So, I guess it's a long-winded answer of saying, I want to be prepped for whatever life has
Sure.
in store for the next 30, 40, 50 years.
No, absolutely, and it's interesting because we've worked with hundreds, probably several thousand people at this point, and everyone has their different, I don't know, sort of self-scanner on the whole thing. So my impression would be is if you had a weird mole on your neck, you'd be like, oh, what's that? You take note of it,
Mm-hmm.
and then all of a sudden in a couple weeks you're like, well, that got bigger. I'm going to the doctor. Whereas you see these horrific things on like YouTube of some like, oh yeah, I've had that since '87. And they're like, that's like stage 9 melanoma.
Yeah.
Like, how are you still alive? And I'm like, well, I don't know. And it's like, I feel like that piece of it helps ensure all of those percentages stay higher because, well, you detect something, you catch something because of an acute awareness of yourself as opposed to just letting some random thing fester
Right.
for a decade.
Right.
And then they're like, hey, you should get that looked at. And you're like, oh, I've had that forever. You're
Yeah.
like, yeah, that's
That's not good.
something.
Yeah, no, I agree. I
Yeah.
agree. You have to be proactive. You have to kind of take
Yeah.
ownership of your life, right?
Sure.
So,
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's interesting because everyone has sort of a different color of, I asked Ryan, I was like, why do you go to the gym? He goes, to meet women. I was like, oh, yeah. I mean, of course.
I mean, if I get a
Everything-
compliment from a woman, I'm
Sure.
certainly not going to put that as a non-existent
Right.
thing, right? That is a perk from going
Absolutely.
to the gym.
But I feel like the more common deficit in people's lives is that maybe they don't have some like really strong, overt, visceral reason to go to the gym, and the cognitive, pragmatic reason is the only thing that would actually get them through that. But I feel like it's probably also the hardest one to wrap your head around. It's like, I have to do this thing I hate, and I have to do it every day, and it's never going to get better, but I have to do it. And it's like, I mean, what would you say to someone who's toiling with that is just non-successful? And it's like, well, where do you even begin? I mean, do you have like a recollection of being like, all right, I don't know, maybe, you're in college and, you're partying or whatever, and you're like, man, if I keep doing this, I mean, like, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, so I mean, there were probably my brother. I have an older brother, and he was always into exercise, and he was a little bit more hardcore.
Sure.
Ironically, as he's gotten older, he's kind of stopped more of it,
Sure.
partly kids and job and everything. But he was really into exercise, so that was part of it. The other part is I'm also, and I keep repeating myself here, but if a data geek from the standpoint of I like to observe people,
Sure.
and I look at the people who I would like to be like, that I aspire to,
Sure.
and try and follow a lot of those things. So to the point of doing something that you don't really want to do,
Right.
but making that a habit. So one of the things I learned over the years, for example, is the people that are successful aren't really the smartest,
Sure.
and they don't really go to the best schools,
Mm-hmm.
right? But what one skill I've noticed that they have is they're willing and able to push through and do the things that most other people are not willing to do.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
They're the ones who are willing to power through classes that are not really that interesting, right? And get through them. So they'll go through school and get through school. I mean, it's actually amazing if you look at the University of California system, how many people go into college there, which are already quality students, right? This is not riffraff out of high school. These are people who have good grades and are driven. Only about 70% will actually finish college, right? So this huge group of people just decides partway through, I'm just going to kind of call it quits, right? Sure. And there's many reasons they do, so not all of them are that. But one of the things I have noticed is what you really have to do is almost challenge your own mentality and say, look, I don't want to do this. I'm gonna force myself to do this.
Right.
And it becomes almost like a game for me of let me try to do the impossible.
Sure.
There's even a saying somewhere that says, it takes to do something hard takes a long time. Mm-hmm. To do something impossible takes just a little longer.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so part of it that becomes part of the game is just let me force myself. Can I mentally handle getting up at 4:20 a.m. 4 days a week and showing up and doing something that I don't like doing, and be consistent about it. Try and never miss it, right? There's no excuse for missing it, short of I break something or
the top 5 check boxes that qualify, literally I don't have a car at this moment, or my leg is broken.
My leg is broken, or I had back surgery, or so I have to be out for a little bit, or something, legit. But yeah, part of that, just make a game out of that, out of pushing yourself and seeing, hey, how far can I go?
Do you have either authors that you read or public figures that you look to for those sources of inspiration, or that you've kind of picked little pieces from, or just kind of a collective wisdom of what you've gathered over the years? Or
I don't know that I hone in on anybody. I mean, there's certainly people that stand out. I always thought of Arnold Schwarzenegger for all of his, for this guy who came across and people were telling him, you're not even going to make it. I mean, you can't even speak clear English, right? And you want to be in the movie business, or are you out of your mind? And when you hear a lot of what he says, I mean, the guy became a governor of the state of California, which is like the 8th largest country in the world, essentially, if it was its own country. So, and most people from bodybuilding don't really make it. When you think about it, many of them actually don't do that well. So, an individual like that certainly is big. But no, I mean, it's really snippets from people. Sure. It's even everyday individuals, I mean, I look at an Andrew who, that's what he does. I mean, he's here 15 minutes early. The equipment is set up. The doors are open. It's on point for 3 years. I don't actually think I've seen Andrew mess up. Right. I mean, it is almost robotic to a thing. It's so it doesn't even have to be necessarily somebody famous, or maybe he is famous. I don't know the CrossFit world that well, but just looking at somebody over time and saying wow, that takes some determination.
Sure. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Absolutely.
That's not a natural skill.
Yeah. I mean, the Arnold Schwarzenegger thing is super interesting. I'm with you on that, because it's I mean, and he did it in the age of no internet, no social media, I could DM Arnold Schwarzenegger on Instagram right now. Will he reply no? But that channel exists.
Yeah.
Where, I mean, you're going to come and break into Hollywood. You got to know the guy and get the meeting. And it's just that does seem impossible.
Right.
Given the context.
Yeah. I mean, especially from, where is he from? Graz, Austria or something, this random place in the world where, I mean, if he was 16 years old and this is what he told his parents he wanted to do, his parents would have put him in, some asylum or something.
Sure, right. Yeah.
Right? And he did it.
Yeah. Shaquille O'Neal is an interesting a guy of that caliber too, where I'm not 100% clear on the numbers, but I believe he's made something 8 times more owning laundromats and small businesses and stuff like that than he ever made in the NBA.
Yep.
He was a star, top-paid player and all this stuff, but there's some quote where he said all the successful people were owning businesses, and so he owns just random stuff car washes and coin laundry and limo service, weird, obscure stuff, not sexy, glitzy, whatever. And that's making him, way more wealth, and you just leverage, the endowment of your
Right.
physical assets,
Right.
as opposed to just blow it all and become
Yeah.
bankrupt. And
Yeah.
it's
You
like,
invest for the long term.
yeah, you find those kind of little star players to emulate, and you go like, oh wow, that's interesting. You, of course, you had an advantage by way of like, all right, my salary is not $13 million a year or whatever it is, but like, oh, you can go out and do that same thing, and maybe it's not.
You can do it on a smaller scale.
Yeah, maybe
exactly.
It's not 10 car washes,
exactly.
but maybe you go in with 5 friends on one car wash.
And that was the same, and to take it down to a basic level, to what we were talking about earlier, right? The ability to kind of give away that instant gratification.
Sure.
He had, let's call it just $100. You have $100.
Right.
I mean, probably his idea was, I want to get a nicer car, I want to get a nicer house, a bigger house, whatever the case may be. Nobody really thinks, I want to go buy a laundromat, right? I mean, that's, right. But taking that money and doing that obviously paid off for him in the long run.
Yeah.
So very similar to kind of exercise, right?
Oh, 100%. I mean, it's, I remember my dad saying it to me early on that exercise is like a bank account. You have to balance your, deposits and withdrawals, and, withdrawal is going out and drinking, and you get into the red, then you start paying penalties and stuff, and you get, all the things that come with it. I was like, oh, that is actually surprisingly accurate. You wouldn't normally correlate fitness and finance, but I think it's a pretty strong comparison.
It is. I think it's the same human emotions, even for products that get sold, right? In finance, it's kind of this hope and greed. Same thing in exercise. You want to try and get the best results for the least amount of work.
Sure.
So that's why we have this industry of like pills and this. I mean, I don't know how many friends from high school I have that do these multi-level marketing that are selling, like this product and that product, and most of it is health related. I mean, when you look at these multi-level, there's makeup seems to be popular, but the vast majority seems to be these health related type of supplement things, because we all want the quick fix. And same thing in finance. I mean, people get ripped off every single day because somebody comes along and promises them, I'll triple your money in a year. And they're like, well, that's what I want.
Sure.
That's what I want to happen. And you don't have to work at all. You can sit and watch TV while I triple your money in a year. I'm like, yes, that's what I want.
Yeah.
Well, sorry, it doesn't really work that way. So.
And that's actually what I was going to ask you, because are you on Facebook?
Yes.
And I don't know if this works quite the same way for you, but because of my interest and stuff on Facebook, I get advertised too for all of the scammy things that you just mentioned. So I have a good menu of what's out there and what's hot right now. So what would you say is the sort of like, people come to you and they're like, all right, I'm interested in getting my finances straight. So can you do for me, it's 6-week challenge, weight loss before the wedding, blast my ab fat only. Those are like the key things where I'm like, oh God, so much unlearning to do. Like what do you find that is in finance?
I mean, in finance, it's all about picking the stock, especially in this area, right?
Sure.
Because we hear about IPOs all the time, or initial public offerings, and people want to find the next hot stock, right? So, and the weird thing, and exercise the same way, as humans, we're just bad at things like statistics and math, and it's not a natural brain process for us. It's something that requires a lot of work, so we're just bad at it. And so we use what are called heuristics, or these shortcuts.
Sure.
And part of what these shortcuts are based on is recent experiences.
Yep.
So our hindsight makes everything seem very clear. Like, it was obvious that Amazon was going to become this dominant company, right? The next thing, when really it absolutely wasn't. But you, as humans, we can put that pattern together backwards, right? And so in finance, everybody wants to find kind of the next hot stock, and everyone starts buying up these newly issued companies.
Right.
But again, if you look at the data over the last 20 years, if you went and bought the IPO of the stock of every single company that IPO'd on a given day. So it starts trading in the markets, and you can go in your Schwab or whatever account and buy some of that stock.
Sure.
You actually did quite poorly.
Okay.
You know, so the data works against it, but it's so in the news, because that's what the news covers, right? Sure. I always say, I've never seen a news channel interview the 999 million people who lost the lottery.
Right.
They only interview the one that wins, right? So our brain gets triggered to associate with that person and say, wow, that could be me. I got to go buy a lottery ticket.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's the parallel to fitness is you see a before and after picture with no context, and it may or may not be the same person. And trust me, I know how to manipulate shadows and all this kind of stuff and make it look like someone who's lost 10 pounds and gotten swole with nothing happening at all. And it's like, when you see, and that's interestingly enough, Facebook banned putting paid advertising dollars for before and after pictures.
Oh,
So
interesting.
you can't advertise that. So if you see it, it's only organic, because people are so susceptible to be like, oh, $39, and I could lose 200 pounds. Sign me up. Like,
Yeah.
I need that right now. And they ban that for that very reason, because it's so easy to manipulate.
Yeah, and I mean, finance is the same way, right? Especially with social media nowadays. I mean, people will post. In fact, it's really ironic. I have clients that I serve, and my wealthiest client, who could retire tomorrow. I mean, they have like $10 million in the bank.
Sure.
Comes to meet with me. They live in Oakland. They come to meet with me on BART on their bicycle. Right? Usually the second I see somebody pull up in a Mercedes, I'm like, oh man, this is going to be a disaster.
Yeah.
Right? Or something along those lines,
Sure,
where it's going to be, a new Tesla or something like that. There's certainly exceptions to it, but
Sure.
but we have this image of what a wealthy person looks like, and there's that book, The Millionaire Next Door,
Just
which I
about to
think
say exactly that, yeah.
which kind of really describes that and opened a lot of people's eyes to how the reality is.
Sure.
And same thing in exercise. So we as humans, we want the shortcut. We want and it's natural to want it. I want it just as badly,
Sure.
Every time I look, now that there's WOD A and B, I ask Andrew, I say, which one is going to be the least amount of work for the most benefit? That is my question. That's the one I'm going to do.
Right.
So you design an exercise
Right.
for me that is the least amount of exertion
Sure.
for the most benefit.
Well, we can't do that necessarily, but I can meet you at, I will give you the most amount of productivity in 60 minutes, so that you don't have to, waste your time for 2 hours doing nothing at the gym. I'll meet you in the middle right there.
That's a deal.
Yeah, because the work is somewhat mandatory.
If you can get it down to 15 minutes, I'll pay you double.
That's an interesting proposition.
You see?
Yeah. I really do like the correlation between fitness and finance, and I think it's like I'm in my head. I'm like, man, I want to write a book on it or something like that, but I don't have the sort of, I don't know, the discipline or the structure, or even know how do you write a book? Like, so you literally just sit down for an hour a day. I mean,
I think you have to get a publisher. Very hard to get.
Like that.
And even really good books are very challenging to get published and things
Sure,
like that.
yeah.
The publishers don't do.
Right.
And it probably would get lost in all the sea of
yeah.
things. But there's been a lot of bloggers in finance that have, there's been this whole movement called FIRE, which is Financial Independence, Retire Early.
Yeah.
And there's this computer science guy who started it, this Canadian guy who actually lives in Colorado, in 2009. So he has a very popular blog called Mr. Money Mustache. And he talks about, he's on a very extreme level, so
Sure.
it's not anything I would necessarily follow or most people would. But he brings up some good ideas, and there's a lot of blogs to talk
Sure.
about these, it's kind of called life hacking. Because
Right.
most people focus on like picking the right stock in finance,
Sure.
and the reality is that's all wrong, right? If you look at all the data and you look at the analysis and you really do it the way it works, your investments are important, but they're like one piece of a larger puzzle.
Sure.
Right? Just like you can do all the exercise you want, but your diet has to be tuned in.
Right.
And your diet can be all tuned in, but if you're not really lifting any weight or exerting your body,
Sure.
it doesn't work. Or if you do both of those things, but you're not getting enough sleep,
Right.
that's not going to work, right? So same thing in finance. Like there's it's a puzzle that has to be put together.
So is that, because I've heard of that type of thing, is that the kind of thing where, basically a guy goes, if you accumulate a nest egg of, let's say, $1 million, and then you put it into this type of funds management, and then the dividends of that, plus your reduced life demands, you can extrapolate that till 90 and you're fine.
Correct.
That
Correct.
kind of
That's
thing?
what they do. So that's like a
you gotta live
static
on like
approach.
$26,000 a year kind of thing.
Exactly,
Right, okay.
exactly. But you don't necessarily have to do that. That's a very static approach. That's like if I went to Andrew and said, "Okay, design for me a workout plan, and then I'll come see you 5 years from now."
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's like, well, I could,
Yeah.
but it's probably not going to be as effective as if you made it into more of a let's go with the flow, because you have to make a lot of assumptions to say how much money do I need to survive me for 50 years, because you have no idea what's going to happen over those 50 years.
Right.
But every year you have more information.
Sure.
So you can fine tune that plan. And so really in that example you could, but just like in exercise you're probably going to end up being too conservative, because
Sure.
Andrew, for 5 years, if he has to lay his hands off you for 5 years,
Right.
he's going to take the most conservative option.
Right, yeah.
Same thing in finance. So you might be like, well, I could live off $50,000 a year if I'm willing to be more fluid and say, okay, I'm going to work out like this for a month and then like this for a month, and different. So it's all about being able to be malleable. I don't know if that's the right word.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. The I remember what I was going to say. It was based on what kind of car somebody drives up in. I mean, it's super interesting. That's like the Warren Buffett thing, where he still owns, the $40,000 house in, where's he from, Oklahoma? Or something like that, and drives like a '87 Buick, whatever it is. And are you familiar with Gary Vaynerchuk?
Name sounds vaguely familiar, but no.
He's if you may have heard, Google him or whatever, and you recognize him. But he has this sort of like this mantra that I love. He goes, you spend too much time working at a job that you hate, buying dumb shit to impress people that you don't like. And it's like, yeah, that can sum it up sometimes. And again, the analogy back to fitness is sometimes I ask people like, well, why do you want X so bad? It's like the ROI of a six-pack is actually kind of shitty. It takes a lot of work. It doesn't do anything. And no one ever sees it. And the people who might be impressed by that are probably not people that you actually would care to associate with, because they're one-dimensional, fixed on six-pack. It's like, well, what does that look like? So okay, well, what else can I throw my dart at for fitness? And it's like, oh, I want big muscles. And it's like, well, why? And it becomes this sort of chase as to very difficult to actually determine what you as the individual value for fitness, because it's very easy to be like, I want to be Hugh Jackman, big and jacked. Well, you can't have that. Well, I want to be, it's like, it's tough, So you buy a Tesla because you're like, this is what I do with money, right?
Yeah. But the thing is, 6 months later, you have the Tesla and you're like, oh, I have to wash it now. And I have to go get my tires changed. And, oh, you know what? This feels the same as when I was driving a Civic.
Yep.
Right? And
beat
the
up
same.
Civic with
yeah,
no
beat
mirror.
up Civic with no mirror. And except now it drives itself. And some people might look at me. In fact, I laugh because, I like not cars, don't get me wrong. Sure. But one of the concerns is, you get in a fender bender where you rear end somebody in a Civic with no mirror. Yeah. It's going to be like, oh, sorry, don't worry about it. We'll just work it out. Yeah. We'll talk about it, things like that, right? You rear end that same person in your Porsche Cayenne, all of a sudden they're going to be having neck problems. Sure, they're going to be, right? Yeah. All these other things pop up. So I would say one of the dangers is, of what we do, it backfires on us, because not only are we impressing people or trying to impress people that really we don't even care about,
sure.
But on top of that, we are attracting envy and, sure. I don't post a lot really on social media, partly because I'm registered with the Securities and Exchange Commission, which sure, yeah. archives everything I do on social media for like 25 million years. Yeah. So I'm pretty thoughtful of, sure. Is this worth having up there?
Right.
But a lot of people put stuff on there, and it turns into some people get very envious of it, and yep. And I don't know, and so I think some people get off on that, like they want to make other people envious. And I guess you could go down this rabbit hole of like life philosophy. What is the point of us being on Earth? Or are we just sure. an accident, or we walk around, so we're trying to figure out a purpose, right? And that seems to feed our inner need for satisfaction. Don't get me wrong. If somebody in my 4:45 a.m. crew, who mostly beats me up, says, great job, Arek, I'm like, oh, thanks. So yeah. I get that same gratification too, and I get some words of affirmation.
Yeah. So. Yeah. It's sort of meandered down this like more philosophical place, which I'm perfectly happy to go. But it's difficult to ascertain. The proposition of, all right, I'm gonna wake up back to the original question. I'm gonna wake up at 4:45 in the morning, or 4:20 in the morning, to go to the gym. Why? Well, so I can be healthy. Why? And most people don't ask you like, well, why do you want to be healthy? It's like, to live a long time? Well, why? And it's like you get to these kind of end places where you're like, oh, wait, man, I gotta really think about like, what am I doing?
Well, I mean, I think for me it's helpful. I'm not religious, sure. So in my mind, when it's over, it just goes black. Just like I don't remember the sure. last billion years, I'm not going to remember the next billion years. Sure. Well, the problem with that is if you go down that rabbit hole, sure. it's really scary, right? Because like forever is forever. It feels really weird. So you can start going down this hole. So
Yeah.
part of it is like, well, I want to live a long time because I don't think there is no plan B. This is all you get, right?
You get
So
plan A, you get one life.
yeah, you get plan A, and that's it. You get
Yeah.
one life, and that's it. There's no, I'm not going to come back as my dog who gets spoiled or anything like that. It's
Sure.
it. So I think that, for me at least, that certainly contributes to this. Be healthy, and I enjoy life. I have a daughter. I want to be able to travel with her and spend time with her too as she gets older, and do all this stuff. So I don't really want to be 80 and live to be 95, but those 15 years are
Sure.
kind of confined to,
Right.
you know.
It's, I think ultimately, are you a Jordan Peterson fan? Have you ever heard of? I get very into the interwebs on like following people and like their ideas on these things, but I think it's a delicate balance of mitigating suffering,
Yep.
trying to elevate happiness, and trying to keep misery is inevitable, but trying to keep it at bay as much as possible, so that it's like, what is the optimism of living to 95? Well, it doesn't sound amazing, but it could be worse. You could be 95 and miserable, or you could be 95 and pretty happy. So I'm gonna like shoot for that one,
Yes.
and like, what does that look like? Well, it'd be nice if I could walk on my own, and it'd be nice if I was semi-autonomous and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, juggling that big thing, I think, is the big why of like, okay, how are we going to put this together? What's this going to look like? Make sure I have enough money, and make sure my legs aren't broken, make sure my family still loves me, and like.
Yeah, it's a puzzle. Yeah, that's so true.
Yeah.
I think that's a great analogy, and having an exercise is one of those pieces
Sure.
of that puzzle, right? And you have to be kind of firing on all cylinders for in terms of life. So this is just one of those cylinders, is exercise.
Yeah.
And in my mind, it is not a pleasurable thing. Finance, I love. Like, I don't even feel like I go to work. I
Sure.
love this stuff. I love it. I feel like I'm hacking things and
Yeah.
reading and like getting into the math of things and
Right.
all of this. But exercise, that's why I'm like, Andrew, I don't want to know what we're gonna do. I don't want you like put it on the. You don't even have to put it on the board until
Sure.
like a minute before the WOD's gonna start.
Right.
Otherwise, I'm going to
Right.
spend the stretching going like, oh my God.
Right. Well, it sounds like we're both particularly well suited to do what we do. Because you just described it. I was like, oh man, I love getting into hacking and like, talking about like, oh, how can I help this person? Like, oh man, they're needing this and that. And like, okay, here's what I'm going to tell them. And that's yeah.
And that's the value add. That's what I love. That's why I don't foresee stopping over the next 50 years is because you're doing that hacking for me. So I can just show up and be like, okay, what, and I trust you. Then that same thing for me, right? In finance, it's the same thing. You can go to somebody who sells insurance, and obviously they have a very specific goal in mind, or somebody who sells investments or something along those lines. It's so same thing in exercise, right? If I'm going to a place that makes most of their money selling their nutritional products,
Sure.
then I'm going to have some problems there. But if I'm just paying you a fee and saying, here's my money, and I want you to take this load off me to find like the best hacks when
Sure.
it comes to diet and exercise and sleeping and stretching and
Yeah. It's paying for expertise rather
yeah,
than
paying for expertise.
the
I want you
DIY
to do
version.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Very cool. Well, thanks for sitting down.
Of course.
Good
Thanks for
conversation.
having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
After I saw Ryan start this off, I was like, there's no way he, especially since he kind of half cheats on our 4:45 a.m. class. Started going to afternoon classes, other times and stuff like that.
Yep.
It's not allowed in 4:45 a.m.
Yeah. I
We
know.
have
You
rules.
guys are a tight-knit bunch.
We're a very tight-knit bunch.
Yeah.
When you work out with people at 4:45 a.m., you see things you should never see.